Hey guys, welcome back. BDCKR here, and as promised, we have our kind of more in-depth review of the 3 books that we got from Tor.com.
So we'll start with the one that we specifically requested. So we mentioned we know of Seanan McGuire. We met her once at a convention, and she writes under 2 different names. One is her real name, I guess, Seanan McGuire, where she does her urban fantasy, and one as she also writes as Mira Grant, where she does her horror. And
Yeah.
she's probably best known for her Newsflesh trilogy, Feed, Deadline, Blackout.
Which is an interesting series about the zombie apocalypse, but kind of post-zombie apocalypse, how people recover and then start to make their living even around it. So this is bloggers in the zombie apocalypse.
And we highly recommend this. It is such a great adventure story. It pays homage to the original sort of Romero zombies while being its own thing, and it comes up with a very credible explanation for how it works. And besides all that, it's just a lot of fun to read. So if you like horror, you like zombies, you should definitely give this a try. And that's how we came at Seanan McGuire's latest book, Every Heart a Doorway. And this is what you call a portal fantasy. So we mentioned this earlier, but a portal fantasy is where it's a secondary world fantasy with ties to our real world, but you get into the other world through a portal.
Yeah, so the basic premise of this is that there's a school where people who have been to another world and then came back out of that other world go to try to kind of get over their experiences, because they go to this other world and they either want to stay or,
Well, think about it.
The experiences change them, and they change them significantly because they're in this, new area where, all the laws are different, everything's just changed.
And you're the chosen one.
Yeah.
You are, instead of being just a regular person, you are somehow the most important thing. I mean, it's how the narrative works, right? You're the most important thing in this world, and you are going to make a huge difference. And then all of a sudden, you're back in the real world where you're really nobody.
Yeah, so there's a couple of mystery elements to it. It's really interesting as far as it goes into explaining the different worlds and how they work in the particular universe that the story takes place in.
And for how short it is, I think it packs a huge emotional wallop. It actually has... A lot of books take a long time for you to engage with the characters, and I think she gets to it really quick by maybe taking advantage of some of the ties that we have to portal fantasies, right? I mean, a lot of people have read The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
Yeah.
That's Alice in Wonderland. Those are sort of the classic portal fantasies where you've got that little gateway into the secondary fantasy world. And yeah, I mean, even in those, there's the examples where, some of the kids come back out of Narnia and they find themselves almost at a bit of a loss, but C.S. Lewis never really explores that properly.
So it's really, really interesting. It's engaging. I would recommend it to even people who think it might not be their cup of tea. If it sounds a little too whimsical for you, it really gets a little bit darker in its kind of analysis of the topic. It's not just you go through a portal to a magical world. There's a bunch of stuff that makes it really interesting and really real. It feels like the characters feel pretty organic, and even when they're really strange and they've been through things that don't make any sense, and it's made them kind of change themselves to fit the world that they found themselves living in. They still really feel like people.
Right. I absolutely love it. I recommend this wholeheartedly to anybody. It's coming out in April. It is spectacular, actually. It sounded good when I heard about it, and it paid off in every way.
Yeah. So, we actually wanted to compare it to something, which is another really good portal fantasy, called The Mirror of Her Dreams.
Alright, so this is interesting. Stephen R. Donaldson is really well known for his Thomas Covenant series. And another famous sort of portal fantasy, I never got into it. I tried it a couple times. I totally bounced off it. It was not my cup of tea. I found it difficult to engage with the main character. And funnily enough, this is also portal fantasy, and I love this. This was, to me, I mean, it's sort of the exact opposite of what I think Tor.com is trying to do with creating a market for shorter stories. This is literally the prototypical kind of doorstop fantasy. It's 2-part series.
Thick as a brick.
Mirror of Her Dreams, Man Writes Through, and they are excellent. You know how some people need to see some. It's not, doesn't always have to be something brand new. It's classic high fantasy, and it's just done really well.
Yeah, so that's 2 reviews for the price of 1. If you like either Mirror for Dreams if you've already read it, or you're looking for something to read, that's a good long read. And if you like Every Hearted Doorway, you can definitely move on to Mirrors for Dreams or vice versa.
And if you like Seanan McGuire, Mirror Grant is also Seanan McGuire. And you know what? Now that I've read this, I'm quite tempted. I know that urban fantasy typically isn't my thing, but if it's her October Day series is anything near as good as this, I'm going to be giving it a try, and I think I'm going to be like.
Yeah, I think the one thing that we've learned from Seanan McGuire and Mira Grant is that she can do any genre which she has written something in appears to be written very, very well. And
yeah, I'm willing to go wherever she goes. She's given me a lot of confidence that she's inspired a lot of confidence in her writing. I think I'm gonna have to take a look at those Toby Day series.
Yeah, so The Devil You Know, we talked about it a little bit last video, but it's a really good second world fantasy.
Secondary world?
Secondary world fantasy, where this guy sells his soul to the devil, and it's just kind of talking about how he uses the extra 20 years that he buys with his immortal soul on Earth. And so it's really, really cool, really interesting, and really funny, which is the part that was kind of most surprising to us, I guess.
Well, when you read I mentioned this earlier too, when you read
Yeah.
the description about a guy basically looking to cheat the father of lies by selling his soul, it sounds like humor. When you look at how it's marketed, it's targeted for fantasy historical and fantasy dark fantasy, and then when you read it, it's got that really sort of sublime sense of humor. It's really dry, and it's never really sort of laugh out loud, but it's that kind of story where I found myself smiling a lot through it.
Yeah.
Man, that is cool.
And it's
funny.
a book that, even if you have no idea what's going on, and there is a little bit of a mystery element, because they kind of don't want to give it away all at the start, like exactly how he's tricking the father of lies, exactly what he's doing with his extra 20 years, right? So it's a little bit of a kind of mystery as you read along to try to figure out what's going on. But it has a really strong direction. It knows exactly where it's going and what it's doing, and like each moment is really engaging in and of itself, but also as part of the whole.
Right. So apparently K.G. Parker has won a couple of World Fantasy Awards, and K.G. Parker is also a nom de plume for Tom Holt, who's done a bunch of other fantasies. I've never read Tom Holt, I've never read K.G. Parker before. Again, this was absolutely brilliant. It's a nice short book, and I almost can't believe how much he was able to pack in such a short story. Totally enjoyed it.
This as a book is enough to convince us to look into his other stuff and see if everything else is as good as this was.
Yeah. So and big thank you to publicity department Tor.com when we asked for the Seanan McGuire book, and they mentioned that they were going to send out a few other goodies.
And they sent us these, which are the best kind of goodies to get from a book publisher.
Yeah. So last we've got Lust Locked. Oh, I'm going to grab something. You start off.
Okay, so Lust Locked is really interesting because it has a lot of pop culture references. It's meant to be totally lighthearted. Like we said in the previous video, it's really a wild ride. And they try to do a lot of really, really cool stuff. Like, a lot of the book is made up of, kind of weird premises that you might not have thought of. And that's where it tries to derive a lot of its humor from. Mm-hmm. So, the basic premise is it's 2 new people who are coming to work for a supernatural catering company, and this is surrounding the gig of catering for the Goblin King's wedding, and the Goblin King is David Bowie.
Oh, it's Goblin King's son's wedding.
Sorry, Goblin King's son's wedding. So
right.
my mistake.
Right, it sort of alludes to. I mean, if you have some of the context, it's David Bowie because he was the Goblin King that they mentioned that played the Goblin King.
Yeah, it's like he played the Goblin King in the movie, and then at one point it says David.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit of a giveaway. And what's cool about Lust Locked too is there's actually a bonus story at the end. And I personally actually enjoyed the bonus story more than I enjoyed the original story itself because the original story is really cool. the main problem I find with it is that a lot of it is riding on the concepts, right? And a lot of it seems to be already kind of established in the previous books,
Right.
as we already talked about.
It references a lot of things that happened before, and I think some of it would carry maybe a little bit more emotional weight if we knew what had happened before.
So, but what I really liked about the story was it related to something that I already knew about. I felt like I was reading the continuation of something because I had already read this book. But it also was obviously meant to be as much a standalone as it was meant to be a part of a series. And it gave me kind of a better idea of how much I probably would have enjoyed this book had I known all the history and had I been had I had the amount of investment in the characters and everything that he had intended when he wrote a sequel, right?
Right.
So the story at the end is definitely really entertaining. It does some cool stuff, and it's even shorter, right? It's just another example of packing a lot of stuff into not a lot of space, and it definitely did a really good job of not wasting space and keeping my attention.
Which is, and you bring up a good point too. That's one of the things that struck me the most about this, because Tor.com is supposed to be a sort of separate endeavor from Tor. And what it looks like Tor.com is specifically trying to do is create a market for shorter stories, not just the doorstop kind of big, thick novels, but novella length, novelette, short story length, which typically hasn't been, I guess, marketed towards adults the same way. So you might be wondering why we've got this here. Coraline is the sort of typical young adult marketed. Is it a novella? I don't actually know all the numbers that are involved.
Longer than a short story, smaller than a book.
Yeah, and also the young adult market has had a long history of fiction that's shorter, but for grown-ups, it hasn't been the same way. Typically, when you have shorter stories, novellas, you've got something like this that's, you know that we love Tim Powers. This is Soul in a Bottle. And normally you wouldn't be able to sell this because there wouldn't be enough people buying it. So how does something like this get made? You have a small press publisher, like Subterranean Press, and they gear it towards the collectors. So this would be a limited edition book that's got really nice, I don't know if you can see that, really nice embossed M papers. Does that show up on the camera?
It does a little bit.
Alright, and it's typically signed and limited. And that's traditionally the only way you could get something like this into the hands of readers.
Yeah, so whenever something's short enough like Coraline, and you saw that with probably a lot of the audience that read Coraline, is it is marketed primarily to a younger audience, and definitely younger than it could have been otherwise. Like, Coraline is a great book for adults and kids, and actually when I read it, I was young enough that it was a little too adult for me.
That's hilarious.
But it is definitely a great book, and it shouldn't need to just be marketed towards a younger audience or have to be, you know, it's not dumbed down at all, because it still is totally a great book, and it isn't dumbed down, but like aged down a bit in the marketing and the way that they have to write it.
So there's a long history of success at that length, but what I love about Tor.com is that what they're trying to do and how successfully they're doing it. That, again, out of the 3 books that we got, there were 2 that I absolutely love, that I'm happy to rave about, and 1 that was good. And that's not a failure. That is, I mean, amazing. I love what Tor.com is doing, and I'm happy to...
Yeah, because the length had no real effect on the quality to us.
Yeah.
Like, these are some of... Like, again, it's hard to say because I read so many good books all the time, but these are some of the best books I've ever read, and it's a long list of some of the best books I've ever read, and a large portion of the books that I read go on it, but this is definitely up there.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sticking with us.
Yeah, we hope the recommendation was helpful, and even if you don't share our opinions, we hope we've expressed ourselves well enough that you can figure out if you'll like it based off of our explanation, if not our opinion. Komoda.